What's the downside of that? We give first home buyers a better chance.
Well, presumably we might risk our trade deals and people, certain groups, including Chinese, feel as if they're being targeted.
Well, they're not being, because obviously what we're doing is clamping down on foreign buyers of our property. Now, these are people who are speculating, and so what we wanted to be able to do is give first home buyers the best opportunity. Now, from what we understand, is about 9% of the homes being bought and sold by overseas investors or overseas speculators. But that's likely to be an underestimate because it's being collected from real estate agents. So I don't see a downside to this. I see only an upside, but it's one part of a package that we have already outlined before about building more homes and putting in a capital gains tax.
National doesn't believe this because it says the onus is on you to produce proper evidence.
Well, the onus is on the National Party to come up with a policy that will actually help first home buyers, and up to now they've done nothing. They won't look at capital gains tax, they won't build more houses, and they won't clamp down on overseas speculators. So what have they done for those young couples out there that I speak to that are desperate to get into their own home?
But this isn't about them, is it? I mean, it's about you and a policy you hope to defend.
Actually, it's not. This is about first home buyers being able to get in and afford to buy a house. And they can't at the moment. And they're desperate, and you talk to them, and you talk to any New Zealander about what this policy is delivering, and I can guarantee that they will be in agreement with it. I've had hundreds of emails from people over the last couple of days, all in support of what we're doing. It's about standing up for first home buyers, and I'm fed up with John Key talking the big talk, but no walk. There's absolutely nothing there that he's putting up to help those young couples.
What about the observation the IRD data you cited on the weekend actually covers expat New Zealanders living overseas who have residential properties?
The bottom line here is what has happened is that the government closed down the Centre for Housing Research. We could have actually had good research and good numbers here, but they closed it down. As a result of that, we're having to go on banks, on real estate agents and other information in order to take a policy. But there's no doubt that there is an issue here. It's not a silver bullet. This will not fix the housing problem. It has to be alongside a capital gains tax and building more houses. But it is a factor.
So would your crackdown on non-residents extend to New Zealanders living overseas?
No. If you're a New Zealander, you obviously have a right to buy a house in New Zealand.
But your original policy statement on the weekend said non-residents, New Zealanders living overseas are non-residents.
Well, they're citizens of New Zealand. If you're a citizen of New Zealand, of course you can buy a house in New Zealand.
So will this policy lower house prices?
According to what we've heard from Australia, if they took their policy off, which is what we've modelled our policy on, house prices would be expected to go up. So I would anticipate that house prices would come down as a result of shutting down some of that demand.
Next says he's just got back from Australia and that, there's still big housing affordability problems, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne. That the Australian officials tell him they have a real struggle identifying who are overseas buyers.
But the problem about Australia is that the housing prices are going up at 16% and we're going up in Auckland at 28%. So there's a very big difference between the way house prices have gone up over the last 4 years here compared to Australia.
How would it work in practice? How would you identify whether someone is a non-resident or not?
That would be up to the purchasing solicitor. So when the documents were gone through, there would have to be a check done to see whether that person was a New Zealand citizen or resident.
So how would they actually do that?
Well, they'd check on somebody to see if they're a resident. Everybody has those papers, and they'll be able to check on that.
Are you confident this doesn't breach the favoured nation status for China and the free trade deal?
Our understanding is that it doesn't, and if you look across at Australia, who has exactly the same policy, they've had no problems with their free trade agreements.
And in the end, aren't you just creating more work for lawyers and working around these regulations? Because let's face it, the Overseas Investment Office regulations are easily circumvented through companies and so on. Won't this be the case?
No, because lawyers have to be able to fill this out and report it back.
But if you use a New Zealand nominee company, for example, there's nothing stopping you.
And it's up to lawyers to look through that, as they do with farmland, and be able to see who the beneficiaries are of the policy. It's as simple as that. There's a lot of people trying to create problems here about a policy which is overwhelmingly both positive for home buyers and popular in terms of a policy that people believe that that we're getting in behind and helping out those first home buyers.
I think with respect, we're just kind of testing some of these aspects because, I mean, you see, the thing is, if you put the onus on lawyers, I mean, are you really going to trust a lawyer selling a property to get the best, not to get the best deal for his client if it's an overseas person?
Look, a purchasing lawyer will have to look into whether this person is a resident or non-resident. It's a really simple test. I mean, it's not very complicated.
What happens if the house is bought by a trust?
Again, you look through the trust, and there's ways of being able to do that to establish whether those beneficiaries are resident or non-resident. And we do that already with land sales.
Have you ever owned a property overseas?
No.
How long has Labor been working on this policy for?
About 4 months.
What do you make of some people saying that it sounds rushed?
Oh, 4 months isn't rushed. 4 months is quite a long time. It was originally put up by Raymond Ho, who came to us and said this is an issue that's being faced in Hong Kong, where they have a lot of property speculation. And as a result of that, we took a look at what was going on here in New Zealand as well and developed it from there.
Sorry, I'm John Stevenson. I mean, he this morning said he'd been also threatened by a senior SAS serving officer in terms of, said if he went back to Afghanistan he wouldn't leave alive. I mean, what do you think of the sort of what's going on there?
I think it's appalling that a journalist, and John Stevenson is a respectable journalist, I've met him in places overseas, is actually being put in the same category as subversives. Yeah,
but I mean, now his comments that he's been threatened, I mean, do you think there needs to be a wider investigation into the Defence Force and the way it's handling this whole matter?
Well, it would be a good idea if they did look into it with much more detail. I'm very sceptical of the Defence Force saying that they weren't in any way, had him under some sort of surveillance. I can't believe that would be the case. If they put him in a subversive category and he was wandering around Afghanistan, I'm sorry, that would be the case. And it does bring back to the point we've been making for the last few months, that a wide-ranging inquiry into GCSB is needed. We asked at the inquiry to have the Defence Force come forward and give evidence. It was refused, along with the police and the SIS. The government's sweeping this under the carpet.
The Minister says he accepts the assurances of the Defence Force, and he also basically dismisses John Stevenson's claims about the threat. He says he's got to provide evidence. I mean, is it up to Stevenson to provide the evidence, or should the Minister investigate further?
I have to take the Minister at his word, obviously, but I am very sceptical that you have somebody who is put into a subversive category and then wanders around Afghanistan and is not covered by some sort of surveillance. I just find that difficult to believe, knowing what I do know.
Official papers show that the government's got more media advisors and is paying them more than when it first came to power 4 years ago. Does that surprise you?
No, they do need more spin. Absolutely. I'd love to have as many press secs as John Key has got just for the Labor Party. He's got more press secs for him than we have for the entire party.
So you endorse them spending more money?
No, I don't. I think that what they're doing is endorsing more spin, so we'll get more spin out of the government.
Do you think that the anonymous attacks today on government ministers' websites show that we need new laws to protect New Zealanders from cybercrime?
I don't back the hacking that's been going on, but we definitely do need to take a look at cybercrime and the way it is, the balance between security and our privacy. And that hasn't been done by this piece of GCSB legislation. It needs to have a wide-ranging inquiry around it.
So do you think that the attacks show that we need to protect ourselves from cybercrime?
Well, look, there's no doubt that we have threats out there against our websites that we need to protect ourselves from. The question is, how do we put that in place in the best possible way which protects our privacy?
Do you think that the current GCSB law does help New Zealand protect New Zealanders against cybercrime?
I believe that we could do a whole lot better than the GCSB law, and that's the reason we want a wide-ranging inquiry and will ultimately replace it.
Do you have the support of 100% of your caucus on the housing policy?
Yes, as far as I know. Okay, thanks very much. Yes.